Well, Trudi Makhaya, who's the economic advisor to President Cyril Ramaphosa, resigned on Friday. Makhaya was, of course, appointed to the position back in 2018. Her resignation comes at a time where South Africa's economy is severely depressed and the rand was recently crippled, trading to about 19 rand to the US dollar. We're joined by economist Maudi Lentsoane to further discuss this and weigh in on the latest developments. Maudi, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us. The rand, of course, it dipped to its lowest in about 22 years, and we have been dealing with, the rising cost of living in this country. This doesn't seem to be the right time or the perfect time for an economic advisor to be resigning from their post.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers. You're 100% spot on. The timing couldn't have been so bad with this resignation. But I think you really sit, and when you analyze the situation, you really couldn't blame, Trudi Makhaya. She's been dealing with a very difficult situation of a country that is obviously battling all these multiple problems, unemployment, low growth. And, I know her personally, and I know that she has done an amazing job of coming up with plans to ensure that we get ourselves out of this situation. But I think what South Africa suffers from, perhaps, is not a shortage of plans, and it's not a shortage of advisors. There's many advisors. What we really lack is the implementation of all those wonderful plans that we have to get ourselves out of this situation. So you can imagine that must have been very frustrating for her.
Yeah, you've touched on a very important point, the fact that there are more than capable individuals who can take up the role that Trudi Makhaya held for all these years. But I think for South Africans, obviously the concern isn't the fact that one individual has now left the role. It's whether or not, whoever comes in may have a different perspective or a different approach to dealing with the country's economic issues. Are those the kinds of anxieties we should be having?
Not necessarily. I think our problems are well documented. The challenges for South Africa is simple. Find a solution around the electricity problem. Make sure that there is no wasteful expenditures within the public sector. Make sure that when we've got those plans that they've had, the 9-point plans that they've had, they get implemented. If only we could actually implement half of those problems of those plans, we would actually get half the job done. And so we're not lacking plans. They are there. They are well documented. The biggest issue is really implementation. So it really doesn't matter who the new advisor comes through. I'm sure they will speak pretty much the same message, which is, these are the good plans. They need to be implemented. Whether they get implemented is one thing, and I think that's what is lacking. It is a political will to implement these great plans that they've been planning. We've been planning for far too long. But we are very pedestrian when it comes to implementation.
Yeah, it had to do with the fact that President Cyril Ramaphosa has been at the helm of the country for about 45 years. And in that time hasn't been able to resolve the load shedding crisis. How much of that has to do with the fact that, key members of his advisory team have been absent for a large part of that portion? Looks like we have a poor connection. Perhaps it might be a problem of load shedding that's affecting that connection. All right, we seem to have our guest back. Let's see if we can't try that a third time. Maudi, perhaps if we can try answer that question again. The president being at the helm of the country for as long as he has, dealing with this load shedding crisis that seems to be getting worse, really. It isn't getting any better. An economy that is being crippled. You say that it's a lack of implementation, but that can't surely be the only reason why.
No, it's not the only reason why. It's also the confusion. If you've been watching the past couple of months, and it's still very confusing as to, what the plan around the electricity minister is and what his powers are. Once again, that demonstrates some I think, lack of leadership and decisiveness in terms of giving us direction in implementation of this issue. You brought in too many people there. It's not the electricity minister that we needed. We needed the Minister of Energy to actually implement the solution around ESCOM. So when you bring in the electricity minister, I think you create another problem where it gets really confusing as to what his powers are, and it further just creates a lot of delays in terms of and confusion in terms of the implementation once again. So I think there are a number of really big challenges that needs to be decided on. The president coming through recently and saying he's in support of the outsourcing of power from Kapawa Ship, and again, why it took so long for them to actually decide on this procurement of this new power? It's another problem. So there are a number of issues, really challenges that we just think they are very pedestrian in their implementation. If we could have the similar approach to this crisis that we had, similar to what we had during the COVID-19, we demonstrated during the COVID-19 that we are capable of moving with the speed and decisiveness when it comes to those challenges. Why can't we do the same? It's a big question.
Right. I mean, looking at the year ahead, we're nearing the halfway mark of this year. We're already dealing with an amount of load shedding that is probably broken, last year's record in terms of how many days we've actually spent in the dark. We're facing this cost of living crisis. Inflation is skyrocketing. When you give a sort of purview of what's to come, in the remainder of the year, what would you say are the most pressing issues that we absolutely need to deal with? Because, mind you, the president still has an economic advisory council. There are people who should still be held accountable for these issues that are continuing, with no end.
No, certainly. So I'm sure if you speak to them, they will tell you they are doing a great job. They put together all the plans, and they get filed somewhere to gather dust, and that's fundamentally where the biggest problem is. We need to take actions. We need, and it's not something that we've got time. We haven't got time. We've run out of time. The economy is projected to grow even negative this year. So we're sitting with an environment where we've got high inflation, we've got negative growth, and we don't have the luxury of time. Unemployment, it's also getting out of control. So we've got to really move with the speed in implementing some of these reforms to make sure that, we get rid of the problem that is load shedding.
All right. Well, we've run out of time, and I know we had a few hiccups with our connection. But thank you so much, Maudi, for joining us on the Weekend Report this morning.